Hey guys, how's it going? So previously we have created a user controller and it's simply returning an array of user data transfer objects. This video we're going to cover request validation. So whenever the user wants to send up data, let's say to create a new user, they're going to attach a payload to the body of the post request. This body is going to be the object of the new user. So in almost all circumstances we want to validate that post request body to make sure that they are obeying the guidelines around how to create a new user. So that's what this video is going to cover. So what we need to do is, the first thing we need to do is make sure we have two libraries called class-validator and class-transformer installed in our app. So npm install save class-validator and class-transformer. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new controller endpoint, which is going to be a post request. The Swagger annotation is going to be API created response, because for any post request we want to respond with a 201, which is what the created response indicates. We're going to respond with a type user DTO, because once they successfully create a new user, we want to respond with that new user object. And because it's not going to be an array, we will leave that field off. We'll call the function create, and we will respond with a user DTO from this function. The first thing we're going to do is introduce the @body decorator, which is going to allow the app to accept an object in the form of the request body. So @body, we're going to call this user DTO of type user DTO. Just to be more clear, we'll call it new user DTO, just so it communicates more clearly what we're doing here. And we're simply just going to return the new user DTO to the user. We don't have a database yet, so this is why we're doing this. But in future videos, we're going to introduce a database, and we're going to actually wire it up so we can create a record in the database for this new user. For now, we won't be doing that. So if I save my app and I restart it, and I pop open my Swagger instance, I have a new endpoint documented here that I can use to test my work. So let's go ahead and test this new endpoint and see what we get. I'm going to create a new user called foobar, and what I would expect to happen is this 201 response to come back to me with the name foobar. Execute the request, and we did in fact get the new user object returned to us. This is very plain vanilla in the sense that there's no validation happening on the server side. So, you know, if somebody wants to send up let's say a name that doesn't have anything in it, we probably don't want to allow that. So we want to validate that, hey, the name actually has some text included in it. This is where class-validator comes into play. So if I go to my user DTO object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a new decorator called @length. And what this @length decorator is going to do for me is it's going to allow me to set the length of that name field, the acceptable length. So let's go ahead and import from class-validator. We're going to import the decorator length, and the first argument is going to be the minimum length. So we want to make a minimum length of, let's say, 3 characters and we want a maximum length of, let's say, 40 characters. And then we want to pass it an error message. So this is what we'll be responding to the user if this validation is not acceptable. So we'll say name must be between 3 to 40 chars. Alright. So I restarted my app. I'm going to go ahead and hit execute. And it appears as though nothing has happened. There's a good reason why. So in Nest, there is something called a pipe that you can use to decorate your controllers with that will allow the incoming request to be intercepted before it actually gets to your request handler, your route handler. In this case, post is our route handler, and it's what is the function that's going to be activated on the server once the request finally comes through. This pipe that we're about to add is going to intercept the request before it gets to the route handler. So I'm going to do use pipes, and I'm going to introduce a new validation pipe. This validation pipe is going to be imported from just the NestJS common library, so that's fine. And I'm going to go ahead and save it and pop back over to my Swagger instance. Now I'm going to try to execute this same request with an empty name field, and it looks as though I've received a HTTP 400 bad request. This is because the constraint's length was not met, and the error message is name must be between 3 to 40 chars. So we've just introduced validation on our post request endpoint. The last thing we need to do is document this in Swagger. So we'll do API bad request response, and the description is going to be user schema invalid. That's not going to be the error message that we're always going to get, but it just communicates that, hey, this endpoint can in fact return a 400, and this is what this is one of the responses you might receive if you interact with this route handler. Alright, so that's about it for introducing the validation pipe and locking down this DTO with a validator decorator. So in a nutshell, that's how you protect your endpoints with class-validator. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I hope this helped. Thanks.